Welcome to our second AMA on shared KR setting as quad product groups. I'm Jackie Porter. This session is for you all, so I'll open up the floor. Our first question is from Darva, so I'll pass it over to you, Darva.
Let's see, and I don't see Darva's. Or no, Darva, you are on.
There she is.
I thought I was on mute. No, I wasn't. So I just had a question about the current definitions we have. So we currently have a share OKR definition where you can share OKRs across teams. So I wanted to know what your thoughts on what that were on that, and you had some comments.
Yeah, so I definitely think that this is the end goal, is to get to that shared OKR state. The approach here is sourcing the OKRs from the bottom up to establish a shared OKR at the top. We're just using the planning priority so that the executive team is having a perspective of what teams are hoping to accomplish in Q2 ahead of when they create their OKRs. So the idea is Scott and Eric, product and engineering, would then share an OKR at the top, and the cascading process and the issue assignment would then occur in our normal sequence. That's why we're having this occur the 60 days in advance of our normal OKR process. But the end state is that we would have shared OKRs following our normal stated handbook process, and even maybe create some pass-through KRs that is currently stated today.
Okay, thanks.
And then Wayne has the next item.
Yes, so I'm glad we're working on iteratively improving this. It came up in a recent developer survey where somebody said, I'd recommend improving, this is an anonymous feedback, I'd recommend improving the OK process to highlight cross-functional dependencies and have interjoined OKRs. So, not really spawned by this discussion, but came up separately. So I think that shows the importance of this.
Thank you for showing your support. This has actually been coming up in a couple of different areas, and this proposal is definitely one step to helping bring better alignment across our organization. I think we're feeling the tension of different priorities at different places of the organization. And I feel like if we can share alignment and have priority set from the product group across product engineering, UX, quality, we can drive alignment and really make a difference in our key results as an organization. We don't have any other agenda items, but I'm definitely open to hearing other questions, and we can type as we get the questions going.
Hey, Jackie, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for putting this on. I was wondering if, I'm not sure it's applicable within a public live stream. Just wondering if you have some examples you could possibly walk through to show us what the shared OKRs end up looking like after developing the process.
Sure. So ideally, at the highest level, we could have something like a KPI that is shared between engineering and product around uptime or our infrastructure, keeping it kind of vague because I think we're still in a public perspective, but our KPIs around uptime are posted on our product performance page, and we could have both Eric and Scott commit to that, and then we have cascading by product groups that are committed to delivering issues that are related to availability and performance. And those particular issues are expected to get delivered in Q2 as a result of this commitment that the engineering managers and the product managers and the quality team have agreed to deliver in that quarter, for example. I could see that being one way that we would see this cascade in action occur. Other examples of shared OKRs that are a little bit more abstract would be like total or combined monthly active users, which is more traditional. We've seen typically bugs and maturity materialize our efforts in product as the ways that we manage monthly active users. But in a given quarter, the product organization has set that target as being our main activator. But then other organizations have also set targets for usability. This is our opportunity to agree across design and product to say, these are the areas that we want to influence usability and potentially work cross-functionally to create comprehensive designs, and say, I want to work across plan and dev to create this experience end to end to influence this particular combined monthly active user metric. And that would require not only the product manager and engineering manager and dev and plan, but it would be like a concerted effort across those different product groups.
Thank you for the explanation.
I had a question too, just out of curiosity. Are you able to share any of the specific examples of pain points that anyone on this call had seen in the last few quarters? Because I know that they exist.
Yeah. So some examples that I can cite that I've heard from the team that I manage are being a dependent group, like for continuous integration, and having to reprioritize their roadmap after getting expectations or OKRs to meet new goals. So for example, they have another group that they need to deliver bug fixes for, or they need to deliver particular infrastructure support for, and they want to help influence that initiative, but then they need to deprioritize some efforts that they already thought that they were going to deliver in their roadmap. And that was, you know, a misplanning effort, but due to our planning cycle in OKRs, it feels like it just comes down so quickly. They come like a week before the quarter starts, and our roadmap is already planned like a milestone in advance. So we have to reprioritize our roadmap in order to accommodate the quarterly plan. So that's one example of where it feels like the OKR planning cycle is out of alignment with our milestone planning cycle.
Thank you. I think this should help. So thanks for organizing this.
Yeah, for sure. And Christy, I think you have a line in here.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, yeah, we've tried really hard in UX to do exactly this for the last probably 3 quarters, coming in ahead of time as early as we can, talking about what the KPI we're trying to impact is, getting agreement from product and development and QE that yes, like we'll swarm around this for the quarter. Sorry, Guy is participating with tongue clicks. So, yeah, and so I think we've been way more successful on those UX OKRs as a result. And it's also given us the ability to make sure that the goals we're setting were appropriate. So we can think about like, hey, if we're going to ask every group to do just 2 things in an entire quarter, you know, that's not so much really, but in aggregate, all of those things really add up.
Any other questions?
Hey, Jackie. So from what I hear, and I'm sorry if this has been covered, the idea is that this too, that we will decide in the quiet planning teams will be an additional to maybe other key results that we have for other contexts or other efforts. should staff in OKRs also align? I know that they're not directly listed as part of quad, but they are, in our case, engineers. Should we try to get staff to align them too? Any thoughts there?
I'm not really familiar with staff OKR process. Can you walk me through how those typically get formed?
Sure. So on top of the team's OKRs that we decide on amongst the team and to support the higher OKRs, the staff level have their own separate OKRs to address any potential problem that they want to address, or a horizontal effort that's happening, or sometimes support of higher OKRs as well. But it's a bit loose from my understanding. I've only gone through the process like 2 quarters. So if anybody else on the call has more info, please feel free to share.
Yeah, I would say that typically in other organizations that I've worked in, OKRs are meant to build off of existing OKRs, whether that's cascading or influencing, because OKRs are intended to be a network where you're influencing your top level metrics or KPIs. They're strategies in order to move the business forward. So I would suggest finding and influencing whatever is existing there. So the intent would be to build. And based on Christy's comment here, she's encouraged staff UX OKRs to build on the existing ones. Christopher, if you're on the call, I wonder what your perspective would be here.
Yeah, I guess my perspective is that oftentimes we like to short circuit the OKRs to the DRI for a particular discussion. So oftentimes you'll see it kind of flow down through, but what'll happen is your short circuit. Typically that happens at the managerial level from that perspective. So staff OKRs are kind of much more fluid, at least in my mind. I think it'd be, if a manager has an OKR, it feels like the staff should have the dual OKR there, but also I want to make sure that if there's other things that we have to do in the code base or infrastructure wise, we still have the capacity for staff to basically say, here's something that I feel like is an important objective that we need to achieve in the next 90 days. And I want to focus on it. So I think there's going to be a little bit of like, let's see how this kind of goes, and let's get feedback from staff engineers about it from that perspective. So, it's, the stakes are pretty low, at least in my opinion, particularly at the EM and staff level around OKRs. So I feel like it's an opportunity to experiment. But as we get higher up in the organization, obviously we want to make sure that we're more diligent about it.
Thanks,
Does
Chris.
that help, Andre?
It does. It does. So it is kind of what we have been doing. With my staff level, we look at the wider OKRs and we see if there's any way that he can align that to his own individual personal growth goals and the team and the stage and all that stuff. So it does align with that you said. Okay. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. And if you want to walk through an example and we kind of, get perspective, there may be some general guidance we can kind of suss out of that from that aspect.
I'll bring up, and Christopher, you put it in a very specific way that I can't remember exactly how you said it, but you said something to the effect of staff and manager OKRs are low risk. I don't think those are quite that. You promised me you would be quiet. Okay.
Low stakes.
Low stakes. Thank you. Much better. Yeah, I just want to confirm that's absolutely true. Like, no one's getting fired over an OKR, right? So if something doesn't work out, it just doesn't work out. Guy obviously agrees. This experiment with having him sit in my lap has not worked well, and I'm sorry to everybody.
I think it's worked excellently. Thank you very much. It's awesome that we can have family and live our lives. So please, no need for apology. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, and to add to what Christy said, when Sid is looking at these, if every OKR he sees is at 100, he doesn't feel they were planned properly at all. So we had ones from last quarter that we considered a big success that were 7% done because of the learns that came out of it. So just things to think like that. The percent really isn't, you're not graded on that, but what we learn and our next steps are what the E group cares about and wants to see.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily do it at the CEO level, but we do have flexibility to reevaluate 1 month to 6 weeks in on OKR. So if like you find that like your whole entire focus is shifted, you should change your OKRs accordingly. We're not an organization that's like, okay, we set up OKRs and we're going to just stick to them regardless of what the outcomes are. Now, don't do that in week 11 of a 12-week cycle. Try to discover it earlier, but like, it's a key aspect that we're, again, very fluid, particularly early in the quarter.
And Christopher, sorry, I added a link to as an example. In that scenario in particular, Phil picked up the merge request widget with the goal of improving performance, which was a higher objective in the department. So he ended up using the staff OKR to support the higher one. So that was an example that we already aligning. So it tends to happen anyway.
Where did you dump that in? I might have missed it.
I'll just share the screen real quick. It's below your comment in the document. So this is the OKR for the staff level, and it ends up supporting the product objective of improving scalability and performance in particular, because moving to this will allow us to load data selectively. So it's an example of this is a staff objective that works for his advantage, but also for the teams and supports the department.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Those are good examples that if we have ones that are bubbling up like that, I encourage EMs to kind of share those up, both on the product side and on the engineering side, because we can add them as like, maybe not we could add them as sub bullets. That's what we've effectively done at my level is KRs now. We're supposed to be limited to 9 KRs, but what we do oftentimes is we'll have a KR and then we'll have bullets below it, which include all the work items associated with it. So if you see things like that, I've yet to be criticized that my OKRs are too long. So I think we're still in good shape there.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
I think Thomas, you have the next one.
Sure. It's a two-part question. So understanding the way that we approach OKRs is that they're the tactical measures by which we are trying to influence performance against KPIs. Part one, how stable do we perceive our KPIs to be? And part two, do we know of or think there may be changes to these measures coming in the near term?
So for some of the KPIs, there are some known data integrity issues. For example, like MAU around some product categories is still yet to be established. And we're ongoing instrumenting data metrics for monthly active users in the product category. So if we're driving or optimizing for monthly active users and we're still instrumenting those metrics, then those are known to change. And then of course, we're shifting focus in product to stages per organization or stages per user and optimizing toward those metrics. Those are definitely different considerations. So I would say to answer that first part of it, data integrity and apt to change, I think are fluid. I think whether or not those are planning and changing of those metrics, I think if you're setting targets for those in a quarter and you satisfy those goals, that's it for that point in time. And then it's a reflection. And if your goals then get restated or they change, kind of going back to what Christy was saying at the highest level of the organization, we are planning to hit a target, and then what we learn, and if we shift focus based off of whether or not our benchmark is wrong, or whether or not our goals are changing because our measure wasn't quite accurate, that's a great learning in itself. Did that answer your question, or did I conflate what you were trying to get at?
I don't know, is my honest answer. If we're setting OKRs based upon measurements and the measures are changing, it's just having insight into what's changing and when they may be changing is useful, because that helps me set better targets or understand what those targets are or what we're trying to achieve. And so that's, I'm
Yeah, you're kind of bringing up a theoretical,
Yeah.
which is kind of like the gotcha moment of, okay, if my metrics change, but I'm still held accountable to the higher metrics, then I don't measure myself in the right way. I don't think we generally have that mindset. What I would say is that, my perspective is the general sense for an KPI is there, but like the measurements have definitely been fluid over time. Like look at MR rate, like what we measure. We used to do it in releases. We don't do that anymore. Who's counted is different. Even what we measure is different, right? We used to measure everything, and now we're measuring more specifically what is done by team members within the development team, as an example. So, and we have different measures associated with that, right? But I've yet to be in a case where we've changed one of these and we haven't given people time to adjust, particularly if it's been live within the quarter itself. So if you set objectives and then you feel like, hey, the dynamics change, just articulate that as part of the OKR and then make the change would be my recommendation. And if you get pushback on that, and it's by me, then remind me of this conversation. If you get pushback on somebody else, then feel free to like bring me into the conversation.
Thank you for the call out about.
It'll still be aspirational, though. I'll be clear on that. So that's not an excuse to not be aspirational.
Yeah. Noted, and thank you for the call out on the theoretical. To keep it away from that, do we have a sense on if the rate of change against our KPIs is steady, increasing, or decreasing?
I think it depends on the KPI. I think there's so many of them that we're tracking against. I don't know if all of them are changing or none of them are changing. So I think it really depends on which one you're worried about.
Yeah, if I was going to say it, I'd say I'm neutral. Like I don't think it's necessarily gotten worse or better. So in the 2 years I've been here.
All right, Joanna.
Yep. So thanks for putting this together. I think there's a lot of excitement around having these shared OKRs. I was wondering what tips y'all might have for groups that are, excited to get started with this, but don't really know where to start to tackle shared OKRs.
So in a past life, I used to work a lot with organizational development and how to partner across groups. I was a chief of staff across multiple functions. And a big part of this is setting small goals and working with teams on what you're hoping to accomplish. And it really doesn't have to be tied to KPIs. You can just start the statement with, what do you want to accomplish next quarter? And if you can start that dialogue and you can break down and iterate with what you're trying to accomplish, you can start to draw the connections between your organization on what that means and how you're going to measure it. It starts though with what are you trying to accomplish as a team? And then you can begin to evaluate what measures you can connect to those different goals. I think that's the easiest, lowest friction way to start. And then after you establish those goals, you can begin to say, okay, well, is MR rate the easiest way to measure this? Or is it going to be issues? Or are there more tangible ways to evaluate it? And then you can look at all the different ways that we have available to leverage GitLab.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I think that really helps to have a direction that we're heading in. Yeah,
definitely. And sometimes it can be really daunting, as we have a lot of ground that we need to cover in a quarter, and we do plan ambitiously. So it can be really, really difficult when you have all 4 different functions trying to accomplish a lot. But if you just think about what you need to do in your quad in any given quarter, and each of you come to the table and think through what do we want to accomplish for our customers in order to hit our targets, and think about the customer, think about your group internally and externally, and just list out those priorities, it can come very naturally.
Awesome. Well, we're at time, so I can stop this live stream and wrap it up. Thanks, everyone. Any last words, Jackie?
Thank you all so much. If you need anything, just